so nice to be on the Sunday. It's tradition now that I'm here on the Sunday after Summit, which come on, let's give it up for the Summit team. Awesome. Pastors Mark and Nina, it is always a pleasure. We saw Pastor Mark at Redcliffe just before, and so we've had a great friendship over the last so many years and been able to do life together, and it's been such a privilege of mine to speak into the church's journey and into your journey. And so coming in after Summit, I know that the theme of it was add. God increase and add to the capacity of my heart. And so coming into that, I had this thought, praying into it was this: God will add into your life by multiplying what's in your life. By multiplying what's in it. But not for the sake of multiplication just for you, but for the sake of others. So if you would allow me the license, and if you've been here for so many years, I'm like part of the family. So I get a little bit of poetic and spiritual license to speak into some areas that I think will build not just your life personally, but actually the heart of this house. So this is what I'm going to open with. I've never met a generous, cranky person. I've never met a generous, cranky person. They have all the same issues like everybody else has in life. However, the posture of their heart is to know that they were used here on planet Earth to be conduits of multiplication for the kingdom of God. So the generosity that comes through them, no matter what their circumstance might be, is God is always going to do more through me than what my circumstance is doing to me. But here is the other foundational statement. There is no such thing as a stingy Christian. You're like either one or the other. And none of the Christians would get offended by that, just the stingy people. And if stingy people are mad with me, that's okay. You're not going to buy me a coffee anyway. It's okay. But this morning and this evening, it's like a two-part series. I believe in the heart of this house so deeply. I pray for you often. And I know the great exploits that God wants to do through you, the leadership team. And I believe that the transformation of influence will come when what Jesus says is true, which is this: where your treasure is, your heart is also. And he says it like, he doesn't say it when it comes to, hey, where your time is, your treasure is also. Where your talent is, your treasure is also. No, he doesn't say that. He says where your treasure is, your heart is also. Meaning that you can give your time to something, you give your talent to something, but until you reach into your back pocket and put your money where your heart is, no one knows where you really want to stand and build a foundation. I'm not talking about heaven and hell. I'm talking about a generous way of life. If you want to add to the capacity of your heart and you want God to multiply what's in your life, you have to make room for that multiplication. And I've never met a generous, cranky person. And there's no such thing as a stingy Christian. You're either one or the other, but you get to pick that. That's the good news. And so tonight, I'm going to come around, I guess, a deeper understanding of why Jesus and in the kingdom, greed is illegal. Why greed doesn't work in the kingdom. To the point where I break down the fall of Lucifer, that it wasn't about pride, it was about greed. And if you want to come, and if you're a young adult or you've got kids, and here's the funny thing, people do want to hear a little bit about the devil sometimes. I don't know why, they just like it, they're intrigued by it. But I break down his role, why he did what he did, and why it didn't surprise God. But the heart of it, the seed of it, because it says this in Ezekiel, till iniquity was found in you. It meant he was in the kingdom of heaven, the throne room of God, and yet iniquity was found in him. It means that his environment didn't change what was happening internally. I mean, this is the throne room of God, people. And yet iniquity was found in him, and it was a seed of greed. But if you got to come tonight then to hear it. and you'll be blessed. And if that's part of your journey, I know it'll transform your life. But we're going to break a few things down this morning, and I hope you're willing to just open your hearts with me. I believe God does want to multiply what's in your life, but it means we have to be open to that multiplication. So you ready to go? Yeah. Okay. There's two moments I want to just land on for this particular teaching. It's a divine mandate found in Genesis 1:28 and a divine manifestation found in Matthew 14:15-21. We know it as Jesus feeding the 5,000 or the multitude. But in Genesis 1:28 it says this: be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. This is one of the 4 times God says this to humanity in the book of Genesis. And it is a great way to live. It's actually a great decision-making filter. Ask yourself this: if I were to act on this or do this, will it be fruitful that I'm proud to show the fruit of that decision? The second thing is, if it multiplies, would I want it to multiply? And if it were to fill the earth, would it bring heaven to earth? Just a great decision-making filter. Before you say something stupid, think. If I had to hang these words on a tree, would I be proud of it? If I then had to break it and multiply it to the environment around me, would it be good? And then if it filled the earth, would it bring heaven or hell to earth? But so God gives us this divine mandate in Genesis, one of the 4 times. But this is what I love about the middle part of multiplication, which is he says, be fruitful. We love being fruitful because when we're fruitful, we get to show some shiny fruit on our tree. And we're so proud of that fruit. We get in there and we sow the seed and it comes up on this tree and we Instagram it, hashtag no filter because it's all legit. And you've got all this stuff and you look at it and everyone just is commenting. They're like, you're so amazing. And you're like, that's the fruit. I'm blessed. Gosh, I'm blessed. And then we have to fill the earth with it. Now, the only way you can fill the earth with the fruit that God's given you is by multiplying. And the only way you multiply what's from and on your tree is by taking that pretty Instagram perfect shot of fruit and breaking it. How do you multiply fruit? And no matter how pretty it is, the only way to multiply what's on your tree is to break pretty and to break comfortable and to break what you want to protect in order to multiply by sowing the seed that's on that tree. So today, there are plenty of good-looking fruit in here. We've been blessed. You live in Australia. You're turning up to a merged church. You're blessed. But do you want to fill the earth or not? This isn't about heaven and hell. This is about God saying, you want me to add to your life? Let me multiply your life. And in order to multiply your life, I have to take what you really like as your blessing and break it to fill the earth for the blessing of many. So you're good this morning? You still like me? We're good? All right. This is my little girl when she was just 1. She's now 4. And we were on our way to Bundaberg. We were doing a ministry trip. And on the way to Bundaberg, and we happened to stay at Bargara, so anyone from that region knows that Bargara is a beautiful space. We stayed there. It's got a turtle park if you're over there. And on the way there, it was tradition, because I used to do 1 to 2 trips a year up there for different churches, and it was tradition that we would go through the gingerbread factory. And we would get ice cream and snacks and everything else. And Elizabeth was too little to have a whole gingerbread man to herself. But my 3-year-old at the time, Isaiah, who's now 6, he was more than happy to have a gingerbread man all to himself. But I asked him, after buying him a gingerbread man, Isaiah, would you be okay just giving some of your gingerbread man to Lizzie? And he goes, yeah, Dad. He's just so excited because he gets to do what Dad says. I hope that's always the point. But he was so excited, yeah, Dad. And so he takes his little chubby fingers and he breaks off the smallest, tiniest crumb of gingerbread and looks at me, gives it to her like it's the most proud moment of obedience. And I gave him this look like, what? But see, here was the problem. He was being obedient with the wrong spirit. He was being obedient. He did what I said, but he did like the minimum. Has anyone ever done that before with God? God's like, I want you to be generous. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. And so you figure out, you do your due diligence, right? Or you pray about it. And then you step all the way back to your bare minimum just to be generous by the skin of your teeth. But then you look at God and say, see, I did it. I did it. Are you happy? Like, it's almost like this. And I'll say this, and we'll still be friends at the end of it. I'll say this just about tithing, just quickly, because I'm about building the house. God's heart for the world is the local church. And so I get the liberty of saying this because I'm a guest. Tithing's important. I believe generosity and tithing is great. Not because it's law, not because they were doing that before the law, they were doing it in the New Testament. Everyone's got their scriptures, but I will ask you this. If you're fighting about whether to tithe or not, whether it's under law or under grace, here's the deal. Here's the question. Not whether it is or it isn't. Are you trying to figure out how to give more or less? That's the question. It's not about the 10%. It's about, are you trying to figure out how to give more or less? Are you trying to be stingy or a Christian? No, I was in Perth just yesterday, and I was returning my rental car, all right? And as I was returning my rental car, I felt the Holy Spirit saying to me, that's what happens when you tithe. I'm only returning back to God that which is His. And we walk around like, I'm a tither. That's awesome. But it's returning a rental car. It's returning a rental car. The generosity is, what can I do beyond that? Come on. And I know some people are like, God's been challenging me on giving at least 10% to the house. And so you should. It's not about law. It's not about grace. It's about the posture of generosity. And are you willing to say, this is the community that is going to shift other communities, and what can I do with my finances? Because where your treasure is, your heart is also. Not your time, not your talent, your treasure. If you don't want to give, don't give. That's not between me. You're not giving it to me. The question is, what kind of whole life do you want to live? Do you want to be a conduit of generosity? Are you constantly trying to figure out, like my son did, how to give the smallest piece to God and then stand back and be proud of it? Like, see, I did you a favor. I'm giving to the house that feeds me and prays for me and visits me in hospital. See, I'm doing you a favor. Really? Because Christians should be the most generous people on the planet. We should be the most generous people on the planet. So your finances, and that's between you and God, but I will say this. I've never met a generous, cranky person. So if you're constantly in a bad mood, maybe you should start giving more. So I look at my son and I go, Isaiah, you can't give like that. And he's like, yeah, but Dad, I did what you said. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't do it like Dad would do it. And I then remember when my father took a McDonald's chip from me. Every child knows that feeling. And Dad takes this chip away from me. I remember, I was so vividly, I was like 5 or 6. And we were, if you know Melbourne, we were at the Clayton McDonald's. And he took this chip away from me, and I looked at him like he had murdered something in my heart. And he gave me this look. My parents are just generous people. My dad will buy food for everybody. If he was here, I'd tell you all, just get him for lunch, and he'll pay for it. So my friends used to love coming and going out to dinner with us and my family because my dad would always pay. They're like, we're broke. We're going to Andrew's house to go out for dinner. So he took a chip, and I turned to him and said, Dad, and he went, it's one chip. I can buy you 30 packets of McDonald's chips. Are you getting angry with me because I took one? And I'm like, well, you know, they're mine. He said, yeah, but I paid for them. Are we fighting God when He's asking us to be obedient with our generosity because He can buy us 30 packets of chips and we're fighting over the one He wants us to give away? And no kid ever eats chips neatly. Like, you've never seen at McDonald's, all the children just eating neatly their chips. They grab it and they smush it. There's something about the abundance of chips that we love. And my dad just took one. I then turned to Isaiah. Fast forward 25 years. And I turned to my son. You know when something comes out of your mouth and you go, oh my gosh, I'm my parent? I turned to him and I said, Isaiah, give her a bigger piece because I can buy you 10 gingerbread men. And he goes, are you going to buy me 10? And he's like, yeah, no worries, no, not a problem. After he knew, watch this, he knew the abundance that he had access to. The reason we fear giving is because we don't have full revelation of the access we have to the riches of heaven. Every person in this room that is a son and a daughter of the King has access to the riches of the King, the blessings of the King. And we're not just talking money, we're talking holistic prosperity. We have access. As soon as you know you have access, you give differently. So this is a perspective shift, if you would allow me to do that for you, because we're talking about adding. The way you add to your life is letting God multiply in your life so you can multiply what's out of your life. So there we have my son showing me that he needs some more stone culture in him. Because if you know my parents, they give everything away, especially food. Like, it's offensive if you don't have more food than what everyone's eating. Amen. You need leftovers. Amen. Pack it up for people at the end. You know, my mother has a Bain Marie. We were a family of 4. A heated Bain Marie for the bench top. Why? Because it was an abundance of there should always be more food in this house, so there will be excess later. So I was upset that my son didn't give like I would give, because he didn't have a revelation of the access. How much more when we give is God going, can you be more like me? Can you be more like me? Because when you give like me, I'll show you the access you have to everything that you are co-heir of. Fixed pie thinking is, I have a limited supply, therefore if I give what I have, I lose what I have. There is a fixed pie mentality. You know when I was talking about being fruitful and multiplying and filling the earth? That part of multiplying where we have to break something, it's the breaking of a fixed pie mentality. It means God gave us a pie and we only ever have access to one pie of love, of grace, of joy, of finance, of time, of talent. And what we do is we say, God, if I have to give this much, I can't give anybody else anything else. And if I give it, and that's not Jesus' message. Jesus' message was a complete paradox. Lose your life, but gain it. Be generous and have more. There's all these paradoxes in Jesus' messages. And we find that if we have a fixed pie mentality, which is inferior to the design of God in us, this is what we find in this example. So when Alice and I got married, nearly 12 years ago, I would stand before God and before a man of God and tell her that I would give her my whole heart, I would protect her, I would never leave her nor forsake her, I would take a bullet for her. There would be all these things that I would say that shows her that she has my whole being. And then we have little Isaiah. And that means if I had a fixed pie mentality of how I love, I would have to have a sit-down meeting after Alison had given birth and go, Ali, I'm just being real with you right now. We need to have a conversation about the percentages of where this pie is going to land. We've now just had a little baby who looks just like me, so I just love him like so much more. And I now need to take part of the promise I made you. I now have to take a percentage of that, and I need to give it to this little boy. And then it gets even more complicated the more kids you have. Because then we had Lizzie. And that means when we had Lizzie, I had to sit down at Alison and Isaiah and say, look, there was a pie that I was given. And the percentage that I've taken from you, Ali, and you, Isaiah, I now have to take part of that and I need to give it to Lizzie. Which means the more I give, the less I have. However, that is not how God designed us. There are no fixed pies. Actually, God owns the pie shop. And the gingerbread shop. So you don't need to worry that the more I give, the less I have, because that is not the culture of the kingdom. that when you have children, you understand something that you could not understand until you did, is that love can multiply. Is that love is not fixed. It doesn't, and it's the same with other areas of our life, that it's not just about, here's my fixed pie, and if I give something, I lose it. No, it's actually about, the more I give it, the more room I make for multiplication, because my dad owns the pie shop, and he's going to give me access to 1,000,000 pies. Because the more I give my pie away, the more room I make in my kitchen. Exodus 16, 18 to 20. The children of Israel were in the wilderness. They had just come out of slavery, and God was feeding them. This is what Moses says. He who gathered much had nothing left over, and he who gathered little had no lack. Every man had according to each one's need. And Moses said, let no one leave any of it till morning. Notwithstanding, they did not heed Moses, but some of them left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moses was angry with them. God was giving them supply. If you had a big family, take all you need. God is not against having prosperity. Actually, he doesn't want your money. He wants to give you his. So he provides and provides, but this is what he's asking you. If you're a son and a daughter, there is no need to hoard. Slaves hoard. Sons and daughters don't need to. So the way that God was breaking a slave mentality, he was saying, don't hoard. I'm like the anti-hoarder. Like I'm the opposite of hoarder. I love throwing things away. I believe in things that are sacred, but I don't necessarily believe in sentimentality. Now, that's between you and God as well. But for me, it's like these things are sacred. Sentimentality can keep you camped around an altar that God's moved on from. And so I would say I'm the anti-hoarder. But the only reason one would ever hoard is because you fear the future. And you have to have enough today and more for tomorrow, just in case God doesn't come through for me. See, as slaves, they had their lives in the hands of an Egyptian. They could take what they wanted. They could take your family. If you didn't make enough bricks, they could beat you. They could kill you. They had access to no abundance. They lived hoping that they made it through to the next day. So when God gives them something amazing, they're like, oh my goodness, let's hope he likes us tomorrow and keep just in case he doesn't. Here's the problem. That lack and that fear and what you call a slave poverty mentality was, I need to hoard this. And if I hoard it, I'm safe. And yet God would say, if you hoard it, I'll make it unusable. Whatever I hoard, and if you're writing notes, this is a great one for you. If whatever I hoard will become unusable in the kingdom. But what's this? It says that no one had any lack. Abundance. They didn't just survive, they thrived. It's the point where you go, I'm now hoarding out of fear because I'm not sure if God will like me tomorrow. You know people that live in a hoarding mentality by just going to a buffet restaurant. They get so excited, and God bless them, I love buffet restaurants. I just wish Sizzler was cheaper, but it used to be. But, you go to a buffet restaurant, and you can pick the people, because, you do realize they can sit down for like at least 2 hours in the restaurant, but on their first plate to the buffet, they pile everything on that one plate. They got every kind of dish there. They got every kind of cuisine. They got ice cream cones. They got everything in just this one thing, and they just walk out like this, hoping not to spill anything. The fear factor is, if I don't take it now, will it still be there? Will it still be there? I'm hoping that when I finish my plate, that I can go back for more. Can I say this to us as children of God? Our dad owns the restaurant. We are co-heirs with him. And therefore, we can take a plate of food and give it to somebody else. not worrying, will it be there when we get back? We can take a plate of food for ourselves and not hoard it, but to fill our need and have no lack, knowing that when our plate is empty, we just go back. Meaning that if you are giving away a gingerbread man, you have access to a whole gingerbread shop. That if you are giving away a pie, you can have a whole pie shop. God wants to give you access through alignment, and that comes through generosity. My observations are this: God was freeing the people not just from Egypt, but from slavery and a poverty mindset using generosity. Slaves are greedy because they fear the future. Sons and daughters are generous because they know who holds the future. When we were to break down what that mentality looks like, sometimes it's just circumstantial. It's sometimes something that you're just born into, that mentality. But like love, generosity is not something that you just pray for over or pray for more of. It's actually an action. If you were to say, Andrew, I want to pray to be more generous, I would bless you with the blessing of the Lord, that you would hear from him well. And then I would say, who are you going to give to in the next 1 hour? Like, give right now. So you can't pray for more love. You just have to be loving. Act loving. To be generous, you don't get a prayer for it. You just go and write a check. Or you say, hey, you know what? That offering that I gave to the church like a few weeks ago, it lacked 1 0 at the end. I need to go add that. And the reason I'm saying that is this, is because in any time of growth, of transition, and expectation of the kingdom, the enemy doesn't want us to be generous. The enemy wants us to live in fear of hoarding, that when God calls us to change a city and a nation through multi-site campuses and leadership, what we need is the people that are generous with their time, their talent, and their treasure. Matthew 14:15-20 says this: when it was evening, his disciples came to him saying, this is a deserted place and the hour is already late. Send the multitudes away that they may go into the villages and buy themselves food. In essence, the disciples were saying, hey, Jesus, let's take everybody out to dinner, but let's split the bill. You ever met people that split the bill down to the cent? And they actually take change from the pool? Like I said, you can be like a Christian or stingy, or I think that we should be generous when it comes to tipping. I think it would be generous when it comes, because if someone sees you and you proclaim the name of Jesus, generosity should be the byproduct of that. The only reason I'm speaking at this level is because I've known you for so many years. And I deeply believe in the future of Emerge. And I know for a fact that there are multitudes of people waiting to be fed by your generosity. Physically, naturally, but spiritually too. That in our generosity, we are actually making room for the multitude of our cities to come into the kingdom of heaven. But Jesus said to them, they do not need to go away. I love that. Don't split the bill. You give them something to eat. You find it. You bless them. And they said to him, we have here only. Let's just stop there for a minute. Have you ever had that moment where God asks you to do something that your circumstance demands a different response? And you're like, you're kidding me. You're telling me to give what? And I'm not just talking about money. I'm just talking about life. You're asking me to give what? My time and my gifting, or volunteer for this, or you're asking me to give what figure? And how many times have we looked at that and we take the gingerbread man example and we say, but we only have one. We only have, and this was them, they're just as human as us. They said, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. There are over 10,000 people at this gathering. Have you ever looked at your city, your community of people, and said, God, what we have is just too late. Why give it all? You know, people that don't understand giving don't actually sometimes find more ways to give. They actually just go, I don't get it, so I'm not going to. But Jesus is like, no, there's a whole multitude of people. Don't get caught with your only. Bring what your only is to Jesus. What's your only? And it might not be the abundance that you think you should have. But Jesus isn't interested in the abundance that you think you should have. He's interested in what you have in your hands. And he says, just bring it to me. Even if you think it's only, God can make your only many. You can tweet that. You can make your only many. And 2 fish, he said, bring them here to me. Then he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass. You know what's a beautiful thing about when Jesus blesses you? He doesn't make it about works. He says, sit down. We should be telling our city, sit down. Sit down. What are you standing in line for? Sit down. The church is going to bless you. Sit down. Get ready to receive. Because what we have in this house will do the multitude well. Sit down. I'd love to, Emerge Church, let's tell our city to sit down. Get ready to receive from the kingdom. Posture yourselves to be blessed. Because when they learn how to sit down and receive well, they see themselves as sons and daughters that when they do stand up, they're ready to go and multiply that blessing. So he says this, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples. When we look at our lives, we usually go from the narrative of, I go from broken to blessed. Yet in this particular story, Jesus takes the blessed and breaks it. That's not the story we want. If we're really true with ourselves, we're like, oh, we like the fruit on our tree. It's Instagram friendly. Why can't you just leave it alone? It's not about heaven and hell. It's about bringing heaven here. And so we ask ourselves, God, we're blessed. And if you're living in Australia and you're in this church, you're blessed. Question is, are you willing to be broken? Are you willing to take your comfort zones and take that which you thought was going to be your story that you wrote for yourself and hoping God blessed it, rather than saying, God, here is my life because your story is already blessed? So are we willing to let Jesus break that which is inferior to our divine design? He will not cause us pain by giving us sickness. That is not the kind of God we serve. That's not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about God breaking us, I'm talking about God breaking inferior mindsets and lies that we have believed in order to get us to living in the fullness of who he designed us to be. So he blessed them and then he broke them and he gave it to the disciples. I love this, that he didn't hand the food out himself. He blessed it and he broke it. And he said, what I've blessed and then what I've broken, I'm now giving back to you. And watch where the miracle happened. In the disciples' hands. I want miracles to happen in my hands. I want miracles to happen in my hands. And I hope and pray you want miracles to happen in your hands. And I can say this, that I would rather give Jesus what I thought was my story, allow him to break it, and him give it back to me, so that when I go out there and the multitude is sitting down, I can keep giving a multiplication of the kingdom of heaven. I want to be part of God's miracle, don't you? I want to be part of what he's doing on planet Earth. Co-labor, because he owns the restaurant. I'm not worried about where my plate of food's coming from. I'm not worried about where my finances coming from. Why? Because I have access. And I'm not hoarding because I'm not a slave. I'm a son. And I know who holds the future, therefore I don't fear it. But he says, I wish there was YouTube around the miracles like this. It's even like water to wine. Like, you think about it. Jesus never gave the water that was turned to wine to the bride and groom. He didn't. What did he do? He let it happen on the servant's shoulders. See, when we have that obedience, what we realize is that Jesus puts the miracles on our shoulders, in our hands, ready to take it to somebody else. So I wish there was YouTube here, because I'm a nitpicker for operations and just how they would have done it. Like a nitpicker for details, clarity around the details, how they did it. I'm just wired that way. So I would want to know, like when they were handing out, have you ever read the story and gone, I wonder what it looked like for them? Remember, they had the same issues we did as humans. How is this going to happen? We only have. So can you imagine when they were handing out the loaves and the fish? I often wonder, was it multiplying as they were just reaching in, handing it out? Or did the basket keep filling up? Like just before their eyes, there was just... I would be yelling. Let me show you. This is what 10,000 people look like. Now I understand when they said, Jesus, we only have 5 loaves, 2 fish. If I were to show you a photo of your city, you'd say the same thing. But don't worry, your only becomes many if it's blessed and broken and given back to you. Right? And so, can you imagine? I just think Peter, James, John, Andrew, the rest of the disciples would be yelling at each other, hey, what's happening in your basket? Have you seen what is happening in mine? You should see it. Oh my gosh. It's like just filling up. I don't know what's happening. We just prayed for it. He blessed it and he broke it. And we said that I don't even know what's happening. But I'm handing it out and people being fed. They had so much. 12 baskets were left over. They only didn't just feed the many. It became abundance after. What in our lives can we look at as blessed? But then take that to the master and say, Jesus, there's more. There's more people that we need to reach. There's more things in our lives that we want to add to our heart's capacity. Then multiply this by breaking it. So here's some meal observations around this big meal that Jesus did. The Pharisees thought of their dining tables as little temples. They insisted on only eating with companions that had made themselves clean according to the purity rituals. It wasn't what you ate at these meals, but with whom you ate them. Meaning that at a big meal, no matter how big it was, if I broke bread with somebody else, they were my equal or above me. Because I wanted to be part of that circle. And so even in this meal, Jesus is breaking all of that paradigm. Scott McKnight says it this way. Jesus saw in his practice of eating with the sinners an active parable of the final constitution of God's kingdom and forgiveness. Like, can you imagine? Like, I'm a bit of a clean freak, and I have issues. I know that I have some OCD with, like, antibacterial swabs and stuff like that. I do. And it's okay. I'm walking through Jesus with it. It's all good. And so I'm just trying to figure out that you've got a whole village, you've got a whole hillside of people, more than 10,000 people, from all different walks of life, in the Middle East desert. There's no like running water just everywhere. There's no antibacterial Dettol. There's all these things, and people are putting their hands in a basket of food. It's like going to a buffet restaurant, using your hands to pick it up. I'd be sitting at the end of the line, looking down the line. Gosh, I hope they wash their hands. Gosh, I hope they wash their hands. God, I'm fasting today. Jesus, it's okay. But Jesus was like, no, you're missing the point. If I've blessed it, stop worrying about the meal. Stop putting your own filters through this. Because this meal is a picture of what heaven will look like. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation. You could have had some misogynist Pharisees in there going, I think a woman is beneath me. And they're standing in line or sitting in line right next to a woman eating out of the same basket as them. And Jesus goes, I don't care. Oh, I don't like youth. They're just so loud and noisy. And I don't think they've showered in 4 days. And you might be looking at that going, but Jesus goes, I don't care. They're eating the same meal as you. Why? Because if you're more concerned with purity than people, you've missed the point of Jesus' message. You've missed the point. Let's not miss the point. Steve Chalk says this, Jesus' radical redefinition of the concept of hospitality gives the whole world food for thought because Jesus just wants to eat. You know why? Because he owns the restaurant. And he wants us to eat with him. But you know what? He wants us to go beyond that. That's blessed. Eating with Jesus is blessed. But are we willing to take our invitation to the table, take everything we've got, break it, and say, let's hand it out to the multitude. Let's hand it out to the multitude. Because we don't need to worry from where our source is when it comes to abundance. Time, talent, or treasure. You know what it says? There's actually statistics that say people who volunteer their time live longer. You know the people that are more generous? This is an actual study from a university. I work with the QUT Philanthropy and Not-for-Profit Studies Research Centre. And philanthropy is obviously being extremely generous. And they did a study that the more generous you are, the more attractive you are as a person. So all the single people in here after church are going to be like, yes, I'm just giving it out, baby. Date me. Actually says they're more sexually attractive too. So, amen. Be generous. It'll help you look better. Don't get Botox, just be generous. Come on, let's do this together. We're in this together. We can eat meals together. We can be generous together. If I get the musicians up, please. Our time to show the world what God looks like is not always through something spiritual, but it is through something natural that comes out of us and into their hands. And that the natural and the spiritual will work together. We don't need to worry about that. But can we be the most generous group of people? If you want to add to your life, that's what the summit's been about. Adding to your heart's capacity. Well, God will add to our capacity if we're willing for Him to bless us, break us, and multiply what's in us. My final thoughts are this. The level of multiplication in your life is directly connected to the level you allow God to break the areas that are inferior to who you are called to be. Generosity is attached to citywide and cultural transformation, and it happens in the disciples' hands, your hands. And finally, my favorite, stay away from the split bill syndrome. You know why I don't like to split the bill? It's because Jesus didn't. Jesus never split the bill. So can I ask you, and I'm not talking about going to the most expensive restaurant in Brisbane, spending $800 on taking all your friends out. I'm not talking about that. You can if you want. Can I be one of your friends though, please, if you do that? Is this. Is when you go out for coffee. Don't split the bill. It's $4.50. Go out and bless people. And here's a really practical tool I've used in my own life, is every week. It's true, every week I will say to God, how can I be generous this week? How much and to who? Every week. And therefore, I am not trying to break my gingerbread man as little as possible. I don't live off a fixed pie. I'm giving over what, even when it feels uncomfortable for me to do, I'm saying, God, no, I don't want to be a blessed, fruitful tree. I want to fill the earth. I want to multiply and fill the earth. And therefore, you can bless me. Amen. You can multiply me. Everyone's yes. But God, I need you to break me too. And I need you to show me something bigger in my giving. Show me something bigger in my generosity.